In September 1991, shortly after the end of the Cold War, a cabal of elite bankers and intelligence spooks led by George H.W. Bush financed a $240 billion covert operations war chest through the purchase of 10-year securities that, as it happened, were scheduled to come due on September 12, 2001. Project Hammer was undoubtedly used for a wide variety of illicit intelligence operations, but mainly it was used to finance a covert economic operation against the collapsing Soviet Union, whereby unknown Western investors bought up much of the Soviet industry with a focus on oil and gas, crashing the Russian economy, looting its central bank, orchestrating what became known as the Great Ruble Scam, and a wide variety of other clandestine, state-assisted operations designed to thoroughly prevent Russia from ever contesting the U.S. as a world superpower, while in the process lining the pockets of these economic hitmen who swooped in to devour the collapsing Russian economy after the fall of the Soviet Union. A spectacular investment for all, at least until money laundering investigations began tracing all the money, or when the 10-year deadline came up and the securities became due and began the routine process of authenticity and ownership checks. Evidence shows that several federal and private investigations had already stumbled upon the Hammer Fund and were compiling evidence on it up until the 9/11 attacks. These included the Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI, which was moved to the outer E-ring of the recently renovated section of the Pentagon that was targeted and destroyed on 9/11. According to E.P. Heidner, the ONI had been investigating crimes associated with the plundering of Russia. 39 out of the 40 people who worked in those offices were killed on 9/11, including the entire chain of command. The Pentagon's financial accounting offices in that same wing were also an obvious target, as were the passengers on board Flight 77, many of whom coincidentally held top-secret clearances and were connected with Pentagon black operations. Agents of the Office of Naval Intelligence had also been investigating financial transactions which were linked to securities being managed by those securities dealers in the World Trade Center that were also targeted. 31% of the 125 fatalities in the Pentagon were from the Naval Command Center that housed the Office of Naval Intelligence. 41% of the fatalities in the Twin Towers came from two companies that managed U.S. government securities, Cantor Fitzgerald and Eurobrokers. There were three major security brokers in the World Trade Center: Cantor Fitzgerald, Eurobrokers, and Garbin Intercapital. At 8:46 on the morning of September 11th, Flight 11 flew directly into Marshall McLennan's secure computer room in the North Tower, right below the floor on which Cantor Fitzgerald was situated. Cantor Fitzgerald was the largest security dealer in the U.S. Shortly after that, a massive explosion went off just under the FBI offices in the North Tower on the 23rd floor. Fires were reported on the 22nd floor at 8:47. There were also explosions and subsequent fires reported at Garbin Intercapital on the 25th floor and in the basement of Tower 1 as well. Shortly thereafter, at 9:03, Flight 175 hit the South Tower right below the floors on which Eurobrokers was situated. In all three cases, the explosive, fiery destruction consumed the offices and the several floors above, destroying files and trapping victims inside. In the midst of all this, Building 6 was destroyed by an explosion that took place before either tower fell. This secondary explosion took out a portion of the building which just happened to include the El Dorado Task Force's offices. The El Dorado Task Force was an interagency money laundering watchdog group responsible for coordinating all major money laundering investigations in the U.S. In the immediate aftermath of September 11th, these groups would be redirected to investigate terrorist financing. Building 6 was located directly between the North Tower and World Trade Center Building 7. While large portions of World Trade Center 6 were gutted by explosions and later by falling debris from the North Tower, the building itself did not suffer a global symmetric collapse at near freefall acceleration as did Buildings 1, 2, and 7. FEMA photographer and 9/11 whistleblower Kurt Sonnenfeld took some interesting pictures of the U.S. Customs vault in the basement of World Trade Center 6, which was found completely empty and left with the door wide open. All of its contents appear to have been looted during the attacks. There is also evidence that gold was being looted from the vaults beneath World Trade Center 4. There were several early reports of a 10-wheel truck packed with stolen bullion caught fleeing World Trade Center 5 when the vehicle had become stuck on a collapsed ceiling brace, forcing the driver to flee the scene. Many researchers have stumbled across one or two of these anomalies from time to time, the empty vaults, the secondary explosions, the fireproofing upgrades on the exact floors coinciding with failure and impact in the towers, the suspicious power downs and evacuation drills, the World Trade Center tenants and security firms like AIG, Marsh & McLennan, and Kroll, and their close ties with the intelligence community, etc., etc. These anomalies are not unrelated, but nevertheless became lost inside the chaos of that September morn, the aftermath, and subsequent cover-ups. Okay, so what does all this mean? Overall, a critical mass of brokers from the major government security brokerages in the Twin Towers had to be eliminated to create chaos in the government securities market. A situation needed to be created wherein $240 billion of covert securities could be electronically cleared without anyone asking questions, which happened when the Federal Reserve declared an emergency and invoked its emergency powers that very afternoon. On September 14th, the Securities and Exchange Commission declared a national emergency and for the first time in U.S. history invoked its emergency powers under the Securities Exchange Act Section 12K and eased regulatory restrictions for clearing and settling security trades for the next 15 days. These changes would have allowed the estimated $240 billion in covert government securities to be cleared upon maturity without the standard regulatory controls around identification of ownership. The towers needed to be demolished to create a big enough mess that the illicit activities taking place behind the scenes that morning could be hidden in the confusion of that day. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about who did it and how. 9/11 whistleblower Richard Andrew Grove was a software salesperson for a company called Silverstream. Silverstream's technology was on the cutting edge of Internet solutions, offering software to web-enable the critical business functions of Fortune 500 companies, basically integrating and making available on the web the disparate legacy applications and mainframes while simultaneously streamlining workflow and traditional paper processes, with an end result being a lower cost of operation and more efficient transactions. Silverstream had built internet transactional and trading platforms for Merrill Lynch, Deutsche Bank, Bankers Trust, Alex Brown, and Morgan Stanley, to name a few. Leading up to 9/11, Silverstream was designing specialized accounting software for a major client, Marsh & McLennan. Marsh is the world's largest insurance brokerage and was located right below Cantor Fitzgerald in the North Tower. Approximately 295 Marsh employees were murdered that morning, along with other innocent victims and employees who either knew too much or too little about their chosen work environment. But most importantly, Silverstream provided a specific type of connectivity that was used to link AIG and Marsh & McLennan, the first two commercial companies on the planet to employ this type of transaction. What then were Marsh and AIG doing, and why did they need to leverage technologies that no other commercial entity on the face of the earth needed to use to conduct business? The recovered hard drives from the World Trade Center, combined with Richard Grove's testimony, give us some intriguing clues. Grove discovered that Silverstream was overbilling Marsh to the tune of $7 million extra for fictitious and unneeded hardware. He also became aware of an exploitable flaw in the accounting software that had been sold to a variety of Marsh's clients and partners. When he brought this up to his superiors at Silverstream and others at Marsh, he was told to keep quiet and not to worry about it. But other friends of his at Marsh were also getting concerned and began documenting what was going on and raising concerns within the company. At last they were finally granted a hearing with one of Marsh's high-ranking executives and were told to bring all their evidence to a hearing scheduled for 8:30 a.m. on September 11, 2001, on the 93rd floor. The high-ranking member of Marsh, who Grove did not name, would participate via teleconference from the safety of his home, while Marsh employees and potential whistleblowers, Gary Lasko, Catherine Lee, Ken Rice, Richard Breuhardt, and John Oltzhofer, would die in the meeting room in the North Tower with all their evidence when American Airlines Flight 11 would impact that very section of the building. Richard Grove fortunately got stuck in traffic that morning and didn't make it. Computer hard drives recovered from the World Trade Center show a spike in suspicious transfers that took place within the World Trade Center as the 9/11 attacks were unfolding. Richard Grove is convinced that these suspicious money transfers were performed electronically using Silverstream software, and that the overbilling of Marsh was hush money for the operations. It would certainly have helped clear up that $240 billion in securities and make it look like any of those companies might have done it. The recovered hard drives and financial transactions from 9/11 all show clear evidence that something was going on that morning. Marsh's CEO at the time was Jeffrey Greenberg, the son of Maurice Greenberg of AIG. Most insurance companies were hurting badly in late 2001 after $40 billion in insurance settlements had been paid out for the devastation caused by the 9/11 attacks. Yet one insurance company did not suffer quite the same losses as the other companies did. American International Group, or AIG as it turns out, is much more than an insurance company. With its long ties to the intelligence community, AIG was founded by OSS operative Cornelius V. Starr, 2 Rs, the uncle of Clinton's friend Kenneth Starr. AIG currently operates a complex network of shell companies and other entities which operate internationally and have been used for clandestine intelligence gathering and other covert activities for decades. The company that ran security in the World Trade Center, Kroll Associates, was owned by AIG. The CEO of AIG on 9/11 was a guy named Morris Greenberg, who was actually nominated for the position of Director of Central Intelligence after he authored a report for the Council on Foreign Relations, of which he is a high-ranking member, where he advocated that FBI and Drug Enforcement Agency agents operating abroad should not be allowed to act independently of either the ambassador or the CIA, lest pursuit of evidence or individuals for prosecution cause major foreign policy problems or complicate ongoing intelligence and diplomatic activities. Of course, this type of policy is essentially a continuation of things like Executive Order 12333 and the CIA-assisted Contra cocaine trafficking that went on as an immediate result. These backdoor agreements open the floodgates for government drug money laundering and narco-trafficking. Former LAPD narcotics detective turned whistleblower Michael Rupert has written a series of excellent articles documenting AIG's involvement in drug money laundering, undoubtedly revealing yet another motive for the invasion of Afghanistan, a country which currently produces over 90% of the world's heroin supply. Drugs are arguably the most profitable commodity on the entire international market, and drug money was undoubtedly a motive behind the invasion of Afghanistan and consequently the 9/11 attacks. While companies like AIG launder the drug money for big banks, the actual drug production and trafficking can be traced back to the same Iran-Contra affiliates like Richard Armitage and Frank Carlucci. Unfortunately, that rabbit hole is a bit too deep and off-topic to get into here. I will mention that DynCorp was heavily involved, as well as Stewart Air Force Base in upstate New York, where the two flights out of Boston crossed paths simultaneously and shut off their transponders before making their way to the Twin Towers. Many researchers believe that the MENA operation was moved to Stewart Air Force Base after Barry Seal got whacked. Richard Armitage was the Deputy Secretary of State on 9/11, and according to whistleblower Michael Springman, he was the man responsible for granting visas to 15 out of 19 of the 9/11 hijackers, allowing them to enter the U.S. and pursue flight training. Frank Carlucci is the chairman of the Carlyle Group and was in Washington, D.C. on 9/11, having just met with George H.W. Bush and the brother of Osama bin Laden on Carlyle Group business. Frank Carlucci was also the chairman of BDM International, a company that served as a front for State Department black operations. Frank Carlucci's employees at BDM International left to take charge of Stratesec, the World Trade Center and airport security firm. Corporate Operating Officer Barry W. McDaniel, an ex-military expert in logistics and materials distribution, and CEO Wirt Dexter Walker III, who is a distant Bush cousin from the Herbert Walker line, with an extensive history of managing CIA front companies. Marvin Bush, the president's brother, was also a board member at Stratesec. Although Stratesec maintained contracts for security upgrades which were set to expire on September 11, 2001, they were not the company officially charged with World Trade Center security. This role was assigned to a risk management firm called Kroll Associates. Kroll's chairman, Jerome Hauer, was a longtime personal friend of ex-FBI counterterrorism expert John O'Neill and was responsible for O'Neill's appointment as head of security for the World Trade Center just a few days prior to the 9/11 attacks. O'Neill is the world's leading expert on Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda and was a potential 9/11 whistleblower with hard evidence of White House complicity in the protection and shielding of the 9/11 hijackers from all means of federal investigation. Al-Qaeda hijacking suspects were flagged by the Able Danger terrorist tracking program, which was also shut down by the White House. Able Danger whistleblower Anthony Schaefer claims the U.S. government destroyed over 6 terabytes of data related to Able Danger, which he also claims identified 9/11 ringleader Mohammed Atta as early as February of 2000. Those atop the chain of command in the White House, military, and intelligence establishment deliberately ignored all the warning signs of an impending attack. a clever strategy of plausible deniability which also served to portray those in charge as incompetent rather than complicit. In every major head throughout the chain of command on 9/11, from NORAD to the military, we see a repeated theme of complicity through negligence or incompetence. After 9/11, failure and incompetence was rewarded, and whistleblowers were silenced. Combined with the fact that 6 corporations control 90% of the media, and CIA operations like Mockingbird admit to taking over and subverting our US media, we can understand how such a big lie could have been kept from the American public for so long. But if you stop and take the time to do your research, you'll find all the evidence is there, hidden beneath a mountain of disinfo and lies.
It's been 10 years since 9/11 happened, and we are left with hundreds, if not thousands, of unanswered questions about the 9/11 attacks. A transparently fraudulent 9/11 Commission report, which purposely failed to even mention the collapse of World Trade Center 7, and a host of ridiculous, so-called debunking websites, forums, and other literature, which have done absolutely nothing over the past 10 years to debunk anything other than cleverly selected strawman arguments, and have failed to stem the constant flow of new 9/11 information, which researchers have been uncovering and bringing out to the public. Instead, they continue to label truth seekers, including family members of people who died on 9/11, as conspiracy theorists, and devise clever propaganda designed to prevent the general public from looking any further into the evidence or the actual claims of the so-called conspiracy theorists. In this video, we will take a deeper look into the so-called investigations, which have provided us with the official story, and why they deserve a more thorough examination.
The Bush administration stalled government investigations into 9/11 for over 400 days.
A week after 9/11, letters containing anthrax spores were mailed to several news media offices and 2 senators who were perhaps a bit too vocal about opening an official investigation into 9/11. The anthrax used in the attacks was identified as an Ames strain, which means it had to have come from the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases at Fort Detrick, Maryland. A member of that institute, Jerome Hauer, managed the National Institute of Health response to the anthrax attacks. Coincidentally, Hauer also warned the White House to start taking Cipro, an antibiotic which is effective against anthrax, a week before the attacks. Jerome Hauer also happened to be a managing director at Kroll Associates, which ran security at the World Trade Center up until the weekend before 9/11, when that role was personally handed off by Hauer to FBI agent John O'Neill, who would later die in the attacks, drawing strong suspicion that he was set up due to his knowledge of Al-Qaeda and the 9/11 hijackers, whom he was blocked from investigating while he was working at the FBI. In January 2002, President Bush personally asked Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle to limit the congressional investigation into the events of September 11th. The Bush administration only formed the 9/11 Commission after being prodded by the victims' families, who lobbied Congress for over a year to open the investigations. When the Bush administration finally did open a 9/11 investigation, it was described by some members as set up to fail.
The President has said only a minority of the Commission can see a minority of the documents, and then they have to clear what they're going to say to the rest of the Commission with the White House.
If you're one of those 4 that gets to see these documents, would that change your opinion?
No. They don't want any more eyeballs to see their documents than they can possibly get away with. It's a scam. It's absolutely disgusting.
They even attempted to appoint Henry Kissinger, a known cover-up mastermind, as head commissioner. He resigned after victims' family members asked him sensitive questions about his connections to the bin Laden family and the Carlyle Group. Philip Zelikow wrote the conclusions for the report before the investigation ever began, and even then any areas which did not support the official story were neither mentioned nor investigated by the 9/11 Commission. 6 out of 10 members of that commission have discussed on record how the government lied about the official story, and 70% of the questions posed by the victims' families were never answered or officially investigated. It's important to look at what happened to the evidence from 9/11. The day of 9/11, most of the FBI was in Monterey, California on an agency retreat.
Let's go to our State Department correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, what can you tell us?
Well, this from the FBI. The State Department has been evacuated. There was a meeting going on in the Operations Center. Other top officials were in the Situation Room at the White House. Colin Powell is in Bogota, Colombia, on a 2-day trip. But this very interesting information, Katie, Matt and Tom, from the FBI. They had been operating a massive exercise from their hostage rescue unit. All of their top teams, about 50 personnel, helicopters, equipment, were in Monterey, California for the last 2 days, scheduled to fly back today commercially. So all of those people are out of place. It's fair to say, according to sources that we've talked to here at NBC, that the FBI rescue operations and other FBI operations are really in chaos right now because they can't reach their officials in New York. All of their phone lines are down, and now you've got all of their special experts on this stuck in Monterey, California, trying to get a military flight back because there are no longer commercial flights. So they are seriously out of pocket, and there is a real breakdown of the FBI anti-terror coordination team, which is, of course, the principal team that would lead any effort and was so effective under Jim Kallstrom in New York City during the World Trade Center bombing and the TWA explosion, which, of course, turned out not to be terror.
Andrea, is the State Department...
This was essential for keeping the more experienced and honest members of the agency as far away from the crime scene as possible, while other agency insiders could be assigned to the investigations before their counterparts returned. Federal authorities such as FEMA and the CIA took immediate control over the crime scene and began whisking away evidence that very same night. Turner Construction, one of the primary contractors at Ground Zero, occupied the 38th floor of the North Tower and was involved in performing the fireproofing upgrades inside the towers. It has been noted that these upgrades were completed in the 3 years before 9/11 on floors that match up almost identically to the floors of impact and failure on 9/11. Once the cleanup was fully coordinated, the operations were consolidated under the control of two primary contractors, AMEC Construction Management and Bovis Lend-Lease. These are the two companies that were originally assigned to the areas of Ground Zero that included the North Tower, AMEC, and the South Tower, Bovis. A truly surprising fact is that at the time of the attacks on 9/11, AMEC had just completed a $258 million refurbishment of Wedge 1 of the Pentagon, which is exactly where American Airlines Flight 77 impacted that building. Arguments over the size of the hole of the Pentagon and whether it was a plane or a missile are, in my opinion, a convenient distraction from the much bigger picture of why that section of the building was targeted and by whom. On September 10, 2001, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld announced that $2.3 trillion in unadjusted funds were missing from the Pentagon budget. The very next day, the offices whose responsibility it was for tracking that money down were destroyed when American Airlines Flight 77 impacted that very section of the building. The only off-site backup for the Pentagon's black budget financial records was a secure federal office building in the World Trade Center complex. Strangely, it too was destroyed on 9/11. World Trade Center 7 was the largest CIA headquarters outside of Langley, Virginia, and housed offices involved in several large-scale federal investigations into massive stock market and accounting fraud. Not surprisingly, World Trade Center 7 was the first to be cleaned up and the evidence destroyed at Ground Zero.
So if the Twin Towers in Building 7 were brought down in a controlled demolition, and the scientific evidence points to nanothermite, then who could have produced this, and who could have put it in the buildings, and how did they get it there?
In the impact zone of the North Tower was a company called Marsh & McLennan, which at the time was the world's largest insurance brokerage company. One of Marsh's executives was a guy named L. Paul Bremer, who was also the chairman of the Congressional National Commission on Terrorism from 1999 to 2000, and the U.S. ambassador at large for counterterrorism from 1986 to 1989. Instead of going to work on the day of 9/11 and dying inside the towers with hundreds of his employees, Bremer decided to go on MSNBC and tell the world that Osama bin Laden was behind the attacks and possibly Iraq and Iran, and then he demanded
the most severe military response we can come up with.
L. Paul Bremer was called away from Marsh in 2003 to become the Iraq occupation governor, a role he has been widely criticized for. So Bremer not only worked inside the buildings, but had offices directly in the impact zone of the South Tower where Flight 175 would hit. He missed work on 9/11 to give us the official story on national television, and went on to be the Iraq occupation governor. You really can't get more connected to 9/11 than that. Oh wait, you can, sorry. I forgot to mention that Bremer was also the former manager for Kissinger Associates, He was a member of the board for Akzo Nobel, the parent of International Paint Company, which produced a fireproofing application for skyscrapers called Interchar. Bremer was also on the International Advisory Board for the Japanese mining and machinery company Komatsu, which at the time had been involved in a joint venture agreement with Dresser Industries, the oil services intelligence front where Prescott Bush Sr. and George H.W. Bush got their start with Neil Mallon. Anyway, the Komatsu Dresser mining division operated from 1988 to 1997, and in July 1996 it patented a nanothermite demolition device that could, quote, demolish a concrete structure at high efficiency while preventing a secondary problem due to noise, flying chips and dust, and the like. As many of you know, residues of thermite, a highly energetic chemical mixture, have been confirmed in samples of World Trade Center dust, and the use of thermite at the World Trade Center was also revealed by environmental data. See the description for more links and sources. Scientific Applications International Corporation, a defense contractor with expertise in thermite-related technologies, played a large part in the NIST World Trade Center investigation. A few other names and companies inside the Twin Towers also worthy of further investigation include Craig Stapleton, who is married to Bush's cousin Dorothy Walker Bush. Stapleton was the president of Marsh Real Estate Advisors from 1982 to 2001. He was a member of the board of directors for Sendant, that was charged with massive accounting fraud in 1998, and went on to join Winston Partners, a privately owned investment firm founded in 1993 and led by George W. Bush's brother Marvin. Other very powerful and well-connected people worked in senior management at Marsh. These included Stephen Friedman, a senior principal at Marsh Capital and former partner at Goldman Sachs, who later became George W. Bush's top economic advisor. Friedman was also a member of the Brookings Institution, the Bilderberg Group, the Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, and the board at In-Q-Tel, the investment firm founded by the CIA in 1998. In-Q-Tel invests in state-of-the-art technologies related to defense and intelligence work, including nano and chemical technologies, according to its website. In another interesting coincidence, Friedman belonged through Cornell University to a secret society called Quill and Dagger, the membership of which includes Paul Wolfowitz, Sandy Berger, and Stephen Hadley. Wolfowitz, the neocon Deputy Secretary of Defense in the Bush administration, was the author in 1992 of the Wolfowitz Doctrine of preemptive warfare. He also made comments about a surprise-like Pearl Harbor months before 9/11 and met with Pakistani ISI General Mahmoud Ahmed in the week before 9/11. Berger, the national security advisor to President Clinton, was later caught stealing documents from the 9/11 Commission investigation. Berger was also the boss of White House counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke, and together with Hadley, who was Condoleezza Rice's deputy, was responsible for delaying or obstructing Clarke's plans to stop al-Qaeda in January of 2001. Jeffrey Greenberg resigned from Marsh & McLennan after being accused of serious financial crimes. The first plane of 9/11 flew directly into his company's secure computer room in the North Tower. Jeffrey Greenberg is a member of the Brookings Institution and the Trilateral Commission. Jeffrey Greenberg rose quickly through management at Marsh, having come there directly from AIG in 1995, and then becoming CEO just 4 years later. At Brookings, Greenberg hobnobbed with Lee Hamilton, co-chair of the 9/11 Commission. There's also Jim Pierce, another Bush cousin, who was managing director of Aon Corporation, who, according to the NIST report, modified unknown sections of Floor 83 in the South Tower in 1997. Jim Pierce had arranged a meeting on the 105th floor of the South Tower for that morning. Pierce survived that day, despite the fact that 12 people came to the meeting in the South Tower and 11 of them died. The location of the meeting had been changed the night before to the Millennium Hotel, where Pierce watched the South Tower as it was hit by the aircraft. Apparently, the meeting attendees were not all notified of the change in location. Another interesting character is Joseph Kasputis, of Baseline Financial Service, which occupied the impact zone of the South Tower on floors 77 and 78, where United Airlines 175 impacted. Kasputis has a history of being well connected to the highest levels of government, as well as to the defense and intelligence industries. Kasputis worked from 1972 to 1977 for the U.S. Department of Commerce and Defense. He was also the deputy director of Nixon's White House task force that dealt with the Arab oil embargo of 1973, and was instrumental in the creation of the Department of Energy. Kasputis went on to run a large corporation called Primark that had offices in both towers on 9/11. One of the subsidiaries of Primark, the Analytical Sciences Corporation, TASC, worked with so-called black or top-secret programs. TASC also worked closely with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Kasputis was also a member of the Logistics Management Institute, LMI, whose members included Paul Kaminsky of In-Q-Tel and General Dynamics, Charles D. Bona of Halliburton, Skull and Bones member Joseph Samuel Nye, and Michael Daniels of Scientific Applications International Corporation. LMI's self-proclaimed role is advancing the science of government. Kasputis' connections to the DOE from 1977 through at least 1997 are interesting, considering that the DOE was developing thermite ignition devices as early as 1983. Joseph Kasputis went on to become the CEO of Baseline Financial Services, which was directly in the impact zone on the 78th floor of the South Tower. According to NIST, Kasputis' Baseline Financial modified the southeast corner of Floor 78 in 1999, exactly where the aircraft hit on 9/11. Floors 77 and 78 were upgraded for fireproofing in June and April of 1998, respectively. Another company of interest on Floor 91, just above the impact zone for the South Tower, was Washington Group International. This company was known primarily as a construction and mining firm, and it had just acquired Raytheon Engineers in July of 2000. In 1996, Washington took over Morrison Knudsen, an engineering and construction firm that had a history of working on large-scale projects around the world, including in China, Iran, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia. The Army Corps of Engineers hired Morrison Knudsen to demolish over 200 buildings in 1995. One of the DOE facilities for which Washington was responsible well before 9/11 was the Savannah River site near Aiken, South Carolina. In February of 1997, Lawrence Livermore National Labs and the Savannah River site signed an agreement of cooperation to share technology. Savannah went on to add developing sol gel technology for fuels and other applications to its portfolio. Sol gel technology is utilized by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories for making nanothermites. In another coincidence, Savannah River Technology staff participated in the search and rescue operations at Ground Zero by providing unique tools. Just before 9/11, Washington was going through a tough time financially and sought Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Securities and Exchange Commission documents show that Washington made court-ordered pre-petition payments as part of these proceedings to a number of companies, including Komatsu. Washington also made payments to Greenhorn and Omara, whose employee Teresa McAllister was a lead author of the FEMA and NIST reports on the World Trade Center disaster, and to Sumitomo Bank, which was closely allied with Komatsu. Building 7 was a 47-story federal office building in the World Trade Center site, which collapsed at 5:20 p.m. on the afternoon of 9/11. This building was home to the CIA, in fact the largest CIA headquarters outside of Langley, Virginia. It also housed offices for the Secret Service and the Securities and Exchange Commission. One of the most interesting tenants, however, was then Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management and its Emergency Command Center on the 23rd floor. This floor received $15 million worth of renovations, including independent and secure air and water supplies, and bullet and bomb-resistant windows designed to withstand 200-mile-per-hour winds. Mayor Giuliani was a former U.S. prosecutor for the South District of New York from 1983 to 1989, who was in charge of investigating the terrorist financing Bank of Credit and Commerce International. After he left his job as a prosecutor to start a political career, he worked for a law firm called White & Case that actually represented BCCI. So he went from prosecuting the BCCI to working for a law firm which defended the BCCI. This was likely his foot in the door of this underground corporate criminal network. Giuliani would later help to destroy all the crime scene evidence from Ground Zero. Giuliani's sidekick on 9/11 was Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik, who appeared to be coaching some of Rudy's actions that day, keeping him away from the media and even answering questions for him about explosives in the buildings. In fact, Bernard Kerik gave us the first official government pronouncement that no explosives were involved in the destruction of the World Trade Center buildings. Kerik's department was also the same one that found that pristine, completely undamaged hijacker's passport, which survived a plane impact, and Fireball, which destroyed 2 titanium black boxes and 3 towers. Yeah, Kerik would later receive a nomination from President Bush to become Director of Homeland Security, which he declined for personal and political reasons, and instead took a job training the Iraqi police force in Iraq alongside L. Paul Bremer. Both men are credited for turning Iraq into the unwinnable quagmire it is today. In February of 2010, Carrick was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for conspiracy and fraud charges, unrelated to the crimes of 9/11, unfortunately, but it still goes to show you what kind of person he is. Definitely the kind of person you'd want inside the New York City police force during a staged event like 9/11. And lastly, we have the Pentagon. It's certainly peculiar, to say the least, that al-Qaeda terrorists hell-bent on destroying the USA would not crash their plane into the north wing of the Pentagon, where all the most important offices were, like Donald Rumsfeld, John Ashcroft, etc., and that they would instead choose to target the one section of the Pentagon that had most recently been refurbished to withstand missile impacts. It's also interesting to note that the company which completed the $258 million refurbishment to Wedge 1 of the Pentagon was also hired as a contractor to clean up Ground Zero in New York City. Wedge 1 also coincidentally housed the Pentagon's Budget Analyst Office, where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that was reported missing by Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld in a press conference the day before 9/11. The Pentagon's comptroller in charge of that money at the time was an interesting fellow named Dov Zakheim, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, and a contributor to the neocon think tank Project for the New American Century. Zakheim helped write the PNAC document Rebuilding America's Defenses, in which he is credited for the line which states, "Further, the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor." Several members of the Bush administration, including President Bush himself, would later refer to 9/11 as a new Pearl Harbor. A respected and established voice in the intelligence community, his views were eagerly accepted. And Dov went from his position at Systems Planning Corporation to become the comptroller of the Pentagon in May of 2001. Perhaps not so coincidentally, it was an SPC subsidiary, Tridata Corporation, that oversaw the investigation after the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in 1993. SPC, according to their official website, specializes in many areas of defense technology production and manufacture, including a system developed by their radar physics group called the Flight Termination System, or FTS. This is a system used to destroy target drones, craft that would be fired on by test aircraft or weaponry, in the event of malfunctions or misses. This highly sophisticated wargame technology allows the control of several drones from a remote location on varying frequencies, and has a range of several hundred miles. This technology can be used on many different types of aircraft, including large passenger jets. According to the SPC website, a recent customer at that time was Eglin Air Force Base, located in Florida. Eglin is very near another Air Force base in Florida, MacDill Air Force Base, where Dov Zakheim contracted to send at least 32 Boeing 767 aircraft as part of the Boeing Pentagon tanker lease agreement. As the events of September 11, 2001 occurred, little was mentioned about these strange coincidences and the proximity of Dov Zakheim and his group. Since there was little physical evidence remaining after the events, investigators were only left with photographic and anecdotal evidence. This is a photograph of the Flight Termination System module from their site. Note it has a cylindrical shape and is consistent with the size and shape of the object observed under the fuselage of Flight 175. The Boeing lease deal involved the replacement of the aging KC-135 tanker fleet with these smaller, more efficient Boeing 767s, which were to be leased by Dov Zakheim's group. The planes were to be refitted with refueling equipment, including lines and nozzle assemblies. In this enlargement of Flight 175, we can clearly see a cylindrical object under the fuselage and a structure that appears to be attached to the right underside of the rear fuselage section. When seen in comparison, it is obvious that the plane approaching the Trade Center has both these structures, the FTS module, and the mid-air refueling equipment, as configured on the modified Boeing 767 tankers. Of particular interest is the long tube-like anomalous structure under the rear fuselage area of 175. This structure runs along the right rear bottom of the plane. The equipment attached to the underside of the plane which hit the World Trade Center is identical in every single way to the Boeing 767s issued by Dov Zakheim.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bring it back.
The video you're watching now came from Loose Change First Edition.
Did you catch that?
It appears to show the FTS pod self-destructing just before impact.
Also, notice that the flash is reflected in the fuselage of the plane. The flash is also present in footage taken by Evan Fairbanks, Jennifer Spell, and CNN. Al-Qaeda certainly couldn't have this equipment at Logan International Airport. And even if they did, the flight crew would have noticed it. So where did this plane come from?
Another interesting piece of 9/11 evidence is the last 12 seconds of UA-175. Since every amateur videographer in New York City had their cameras pointed up at the burning Tower 1, the second plane strike was filmed from nearly every conceivable angle. Expert analysis of this plane leads to some startling revelations. First, there is the expertly controlled flight characteristics of this plane. During its last 12 seconds of flight, UA-175 made a single corrective maneuver so perfectly timed and executed that it's unlikely it was piloted by human hands.
One of the things that jumped out at me when I looked at the footage or the video of Flight 175 as it went into the World Trade Center is it appeared to me that there was something on the under fuselage of that aircraft that did not belong there, at least not with a commercial airliner. Now, I'll tell you where I have seen attachments that look like that on military aircraft. So the question you have to answer now is, was that the commercial airliner that hit the World Trade Center, or possibly was it an aircraft that looked very similar but was a military type airplane?
All the recorded sources, all the different photographic evidence that was produced by CNN and ABC, they all show this pod. It's there. You can see it with your own eyes. And in my professional opinion, that there was a pod attached to the bottom of that aircraft, and therefore it was not United Airlines Flight 175.
If you take a careful look at the flight paths of American Airlines 11 and UA-175, the two flights that took off from Boston's Logan Airport and crashed into the Twin Towers, you'll find a major clue. Not only did both these planes cross paths directly over Stewart Air Force Base, but they did so at the exact same time. Another odd synchronicity is Flight 93, which had been sitting on the tarmac delayed at the airport for nearly 40 minutes with no explanation. Originally scheduled to take off at 8:01 a.m., it was delayed until the moment that Flight AA-11 crashed into the North Tower at 8:43 a.m. Another interesting piece of evidence that ties Stewart Air Force Base to the center of this 9/11 conspiracy is the white mystery planes spotted over Washington and the Pentagon. Through careful investigation, we've been able to map out the flight paths of these two ominous aircraft, which have been identified as E-4Bs, a type of aircraft that the military uses as mobile command posts. What concerns me is that both of these aircraft took off from and landed at Stewart Air Force Base. Another interesting coincidence I found was that Flight 93 turned around directly over Hopkins Airport, and Flight 77 turned around directly over Tri-State Airport. Webster Tarpley has done some of the most thorough research into the wargame exercises that were taking place on the day of 9/11. But this white mystery plane, the Doomsday plane, what was it doing over the Pentagon and the White House on 9/11? Who was flying in that plane? What were they doing? Being the comptroller for the Pentagon and the chief financial officer, you have to kind of wonder what Dov Zakheim was doing on 9/11 and what his connections were to the $2.3 trillion that were missing from the Pentagon the day before 9/11.
Why would our government do such a thing? I hope you're sitting down. First, we have Larry Silverstein, the man who purchased the World Trade Center in July 2001. After September 11th, Silverstein demanded $7.2 billion from his insurers, claiming that each plane counted as a separate act of terrorism. However, on December 6th, 2004, the courts only reward him with $2.2 billion. Next, we have the put options that were placed on United Airlines, American Airlines, and Boeing. According to the San Francisco Chronicle, more than $2.5 million has remained unclaimed. As for 9/11 itself, Reuters reported that Comvar, a German computer company, is responsible for helping companies and accountants in New York restore their data from over 400 hard drives that were recovered from the World Trade Center's rubble. Convar recovered information from 32 different computers that suggested insider trading took place on 9/11. Richard Wagner, an expert at Convar. There is a suspicion that some people had advanced knowledge of the approximate time of the plane crashes in order to move out amounts exceeding $100 million. They thought that the records of their transactions could not be traced after the mainframes were destroyed. After their analysis, Convar handed the results over to the FBI. Although the FBI was legally bound to investigate who was responsible, to date they have done no such thing. Moving on. According to Wikipedia, one of the world's largest gold depositories was stored underneath the World Trade Center. In 1993, the value of the gold was estimated at $1 billion, rumored to be owned by Kuwaiti interests. When the World Trade Center was destroyed, the amount of gold far exceeded the 1993 levels. The gold was finally recovered in its entirety in late 2001. Or was it? On November 1st, 2001, the Times Online reported that a large amount of gold was discovered in the wreckage of the World Trade Center. Mayor Rudolph Giuliani announced that more than $230 million was recovered from Ground Zero. However, the COMEX Metals Trading Division was storing gold bars for the Bank of Nova Scotia, Chase Manhattan Bank, Bank of New York, Hong Kong, and Shanghai Banking, totaling $950 million. And that's just one company. Rumor has it that over $160 billion in gold was stored in the World Trade Center. So where did all the gold go? Remember the gold that was found in November 2001? Reuters reported that it was discovered in the back of a 10-wheel truck, along with several cars, in a delivery tunnel underneath World Trade Center 5. No bodies were recovered. As workers got closer to the gold, authorities began restricting access to Ground Zero, joined by FBI and Secret Service agents. One worker, who was directed away from the tunnel, told a reporter, "If I tried to go down there, they would have shot me." Heavy machinery operators and others worked under the watchful eye of more than 100 armed officers. So let me get this straight. Gold from World Trade Center 4 was found underneath World Trade Center 5 in an empty delivery truck with an empty escort of cars. I think it's safe to say that they were running away from the South Tower. The question is, how did they know to flee from their stash when not even the firefighters inside the South Tower expected it to collapse? $167 billion in gold. $200 million is found. And that's just the money. After September 11th, President Bush had and continues to have permission to do and say whatever he wants, all under the pretext of 9/11. The Patriot Act, the Department of Homeland Security, Afghanistan, Iraq.
Got him. Good. Second one. Hit the other one.
It's time for America to accept 9/11 for what it was. A lie which killed thousands of people, only in turn killing hundreds of thousands more to make billions upon trillions of dollars. Are you angry yet? You should be. Every single attempt to investigate and uncover the truth behind 9/11 has been blackballed, ridiculed, and harassed by both the government and media alike for even daring to question the official story.
Jimmy Walter, who spent nearly $2 million on an advertising blitz to convince people here in New York and elsewhere that 9/11 was a self-inflicted wound. Jimmy, welcome. Why are you doing this?
I'm a patriot trying to defend this country from the real terrorists who have damaged and changed our country. I am asking the same questions that the widows and orphans, parents and friends of the victims of 9/11 are asking and have not had answered by either the 9/11 Commission nor by any real investigation to the mass murders that 66% of New Yorkers want investigated.
That we here highly resolve these dead shall not have died in vain. That the nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
That this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
That the nation shall have a new birth of freedom.
that tells you that this war on Christmas is really the tip of the spear when it comes to a greater battle that's brewing. And that battle that's brewing is those who would want to take God out of our society, out of our culture, which will lead to ruin, as history has proven. Any country, any government, society that has kicked God out of the public square completely, it leads to ruin. Why would we go down that path when we know what would happen?
So why did this happen? Our senior correspondent John Miller is with us. He's the former head of counterterrorism for the LAPD. John, what have you learned about the suspect?
He is Paul Anthony Ciancia. He walks into the terminal. He's got the gun in a garment bag. He takes the rifle out. He opens fire, shoots his way through the checkpoint, going down a side, coming around the back end. He's focused on the TSA agents. Inside the bag, we are told investigators came up with notes saying that the TSA were fascists and pigs, anti-American rantings, anti-TSA rantings, and references to the New World Order, which is kind of a growing conspiracy group that believes the world is going to be taken over by forces in black helicopters and so on.
First up, it's all eyes on the sky. Live pictures now from Phoenix. For the second night in a row, military training exercises are underway around the valley. And within the last half hour, the Phoenix Police Department has confirmed to 3TV that they are supporting Department of Defense training around the city. There have been a lot of helicopters seen all across the valley tonight.
Our own Bruce Hafner has reported seeing military helicopters flying low over the Scottsdale area.
Dan Bongino, running for Congress in Maryland. And not because you want to, but because of the things that you've seen and the things that you know. Tell me what you think is happening with the government is being used as a weapon to destroy people right now.
Yeah, we're at a very dangerous point, Glenn, and thank you for having me. It's always an honor. It's been a while, so it's great to see you, and congrats on everything with the Blaze. It's just taken off.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, we're in a lot of trouble. The president sees government, and I think it's because of his lack of experience and maybe community organizing in the past. It's like this shiny new toy, which for all the disagreements I had with Clinton, Carter, and Bush, there were always limits. There was that line you just didn't cross. We cross it seemingly every day,
Every day.
We're lost in the scandals. The Jamie Dimon shakedown at Chase, the HHS scandal, Kathleen Sebelius shaking down the healthcare industry for money, the IRS. It's to the point, Glenn, where these scandals in and of themselves would be huge, back-breaking scandals, are just lost in the scandal fog in this administration. It's worse than people know. I'm not trying to scare you either.
Tell me about the NSA. But knowing you are Secret Service.
Yeah.
So knowing what you know, tell me what we should be concerned about.
You give the government information, it will be abused. It is not a matter of if it'll be abused. Keep in mind, it's only a matter of when. But the bottom line is, having worked inside the government, it will be abused. It is only a matter of time.
So what should we be doing? Because we ring the bell, we talk about it, we look at it, but it's not going. It's just not, doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, Dan.
No, it's not. And the reason is, as I said, that with the Obama administration, that they're experts in losing you in the fog of scandal. This NSA thing is a back-breaking story. It really is. It gets at the very roots, I'm looking at your roots there in the grass, the roots of what liberty means. That flag means something. It's undermining the very principles by which made this country great. I know you're a believer. I'm a Christian. Jesus Christ, as far as I know, was the only perfect human being to ever plant his feet on this earth. We are all doing something wrong. Remember, when the key's held by someone else, liberty means absolutely nothing. That personal and private self are being evaporated.
200 military leaders out of their posts since President Obama took office.
Why are we seeing this purge of some of our greatest leaders, and what effect will this have on our national security?
A lot of these guys disagree professionally with the White House, and as a result, they're getting fired.
Georgia restaurant owner who proudly makes it his mission to honor those who have served our country, now facing a fight over a U.S. flag that he flies at his establishment. Darren Miller says he was cited by the city for showing his appreciation to the troops.
The city now, where it was a violation of in the right-of-way, now is
backpedaling a little bit, saying now it's a permit issue, and I just don't think I should have to pay money to fly the American flag or support our men and women in uniform.
Yeah.
And I refuse to.
Absolutely right. Dean, what do you think this says about our country that you weren't able to fly your flags?
Well, I think, it's a shame.
Should high school students say the Pledge of Allegiance before class? Well, according to the school district, no. Last night, they voted down a proposal that would require the teenagers to recite the pledge every day. The reason? Board members decided there's not enough time during the day to say it.
We felt that we wanted to make it clear that at the high school level, we do not, there's not always an opportunity to have the Pledge of Allegiance spoken every day.
This is why people don't understand what we're fighting for. When we talk about current events and we talk about these issues and what we're looking to preserve, they can't tell you because they can't even recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Proud of his 20-year military service and his 10 years of work at Dameron Hospital, Boots Hawks says he's not afraid of expressing his beliefs.
I believe in America and I believe in God so strongly, and I believe that America needs the blessing.
The phrase, "God bless America," has been in Hawks' work email signature for more than a year. But just days before Veterans Day, Hawks says the hospital asked him to remove it. He says he did remove it before he sent another email. Yet the next day, he was called into the office.
I was going to be put on administrative leave immediately, and this was last Friday, right before the Veterans Day weekend.
In the end, Hawks just wants to be able to put "God bless America" back on his email signature.
Meanwhile, an American soldier fighting for faith after an army briefing slaps a hate group label on a well-established traditional Christian ministry.
That's right. The presentation linked the American Family Association to hate groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazis, Black Panthers, and the Nation of Islam.
The soldier was so enraged, the fearful punishment for his own Christian values, he reached out to our own Todd Starnes.
Yeah, this happened out at Camp Shelby in Mississippi, and the soldier was part of 50 active duty and reservist troops that had to attend this mandatory session. And in this session, they certainly did label the American Family Association, which is a well-respected Christian ministry, as an example of a hate group. And this soldier snapped a photograph that he sent me showing the slideshow presentation, and also another briefing, and I believe this was in the Air Force, labeled evangelical Christianity and Catholicism as examples of religious extremism. So there's something going on here. The Pentagon, we tried to talk to them. They told us we needed to talk to the Army. And at that point, the Army, well, it's been almost 24 hours and we still haven't heard back from them.
A U.S. soldier in our Army spoke out. He said this: "I had to show Americans what our soldiers are now being taught. I couldn't just let this one pass. I was completely taken back by this blatant attack, not only on the AFA, but Christians in our beliefs." Your thoughts on that?
Elizabeth, for the past 5 years under the Obama administration, we have seen a significant increase in anti-Christian rhetoric and activity in the military.
It all started with a traffic stop for speeding, but it quickly escalated into a very dangerous situation. In the end, a 14-year-old was charged with attacking a state trooper. His mother is facing felonies, and now there are questions about why one officer fired at a minivan full of children.
You're doing 71 back there in a 55, okay?
Oriana Farrell and a state police officer are arguing over a ticket just south of Taos.
I'll be right back. Go ahead and turn the vehicle off for me.
But as the cop walks off, Farrell does the opposite, pulling away instead. So he pulls her over again. The officer isn't too happy.
Get out of the vehicle. Get out of the vehicle right now.
You can see the officer try to pull Farrell out while the 5 kids inside scream. Finally, Farrell agrees to get out and talk, but the conversation doesn't last long.
Turn around and face your vehicle. Ma'am, listen to me.
Farrell and the cop struggle as she tries to get back into the van. While that happens, the 14-year-old gets out again. And this time, he rushes the officer, trying to defend his mom. After a short tussle, the boy runs back into the minivan. The officer tries to get him out while backup arrives.
Open the door! Open the door!
Farrell starts to drive off while another officer fires at the minivan full of kids as young as 6.
What would you think if police pulled you over and asked for a DNA test? One woman says it happened to her and she called NBC5 to investigate the suspicious stop. NBC5's Scott Gordon has been looking into the roadblock in Fort Worth.
Kim Cope was on her lunch break Friday driving north on Beach when she came across two police cars with lights flashing.
Yeah, they were about right in here.
She says the uniformed officers directed her into this parking lot.
I gestured to the guy in front that I just wanted to go straight, but he wouldn't let me and forced me into a parking spot.
Once parked, she says she couldn't believe what she was asked next.
They were asking for cheek swabs. They would pay you $10 cash for that. They would also, if you let them take your blood, they would pay you $50 for that.
Or at the very least, she says, they wanted to test her breath for alcohol for free.
It just doesn't seem right that you would be forced off of the road when you're not doing anything wrong.
Federal agency confirms they're doing this in 30 cities across the country.
You can't just be pulled over randomly or for no reason.
But civil rights attorney Frank Colosi questions whether such stops are constitutional.
I don't know, it just doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem right that they should be able to do any of it. I mean, if it's voluntary, it's voluntary. And again, none of it felt voluntary at all.
We should make it clear the people actually doing the survey were government contractors. The Federal Traffic Safety Administration did not respond to our specific questions.
After people get off a plane, the new airport exits are getting some strange looks. Some think they look like a science fiction intergalactic time machine.
I was expecting to get transported somewhere like on Star Trek. I thought, yeah, we finally got there.
Others were wondering if it was an X-ray chamber or might fill up with dollar bills like on a game show.
Yeah, it was odd. I'm like, where'd they come up with this? I'm not sure what it is.
Doors will open and close automatically.
The voice giving instructions is futuristic, but the new exit portals are just part of the Syracuse Airport's $60 million renovation. To keep the passenger area secure, passengers leaving enter the portal, wait for one door to close, then the other one opens. The portal is one way. If anyone tries to get back into the secure area, the door automatically locks. Syracuse may be the first airport in New York State to have the new exit portals, but the airport commissioner says they will likely be showing up at airports around the country very soon.
Employees at this KFC in West Lafayette, Indiana no longer need a password to sign into their cash registers.
They come in and they put their finger on a fingerprint mechanism and it just automatically clocks them in.
Biometrics, once considered a far-fetched technology, is becoming an everyday reality. From signing onto your phone, accessing your bank account, to entering a secured room. Your unique features are the key to unlocking anything worth safeguarding.
All of these people are on record saying they have sold their souls to the devil. Now, whether you believe in the devil existing or not, the archetypal manifestation of the devil, war, death, corruption, all of it is manifesting, and these people are trying to bring it about. What are the villains doing in archetypal literature from around the world? They're trying to overthrow the world, trying to destroy the life force, trying to create death and destruction. What's the Bible say the archetypal devil does? Kill, steal, and destroy. What does the Red King or the devil want to do in the Dark Tower series by Stephen King? He's trying to overthrow the planet and shift its poles and throw it out of orbit of the sun, killing everyone on board. That is the nature of the devil, is to overthrow all that is good. Whether the devil is real or not is not up for debate, atheist, because those that follow the mindset of the archetypal devil are real, and hence the devil is real. You understand that? Men envisioned rockets to the moon 500 plus years ago, and now we've sent rockets to the moon. You understand that? Because we are creators made in the image of the creator of the heavens. You can say, oh, well, that's delusional people running around in the desert 3,000 years ago with Moses saying that. Well, did it happen? Have you looked around? We are creators. We are builders. We're master builders. We're builders. The devil is a destroyer. Okay? So I choose to be with the builder, not the destroyer. I'm a builder. I'm a creator. I'm a lover, not a fighter. But I'm a better fighter than a fighter because I am a lover. Any real man knows that. Any real man doesn't have fear except for fear of the innocent being trodden underfoot. And then you're ready to do what it takes. That means hacking 50 people up with a meat cleaver like Samson. It's time for good people to find their strength. It's time for good people to decide what they stand for. It's time for good people to stop giving the world over to evil. As for me and my family, we have never really developed an exit strategy except for total nuclear meltdown, and I have looked at areas that are out of the main trade winds and Coriolis of the northern hemisphere, and it's just, there's not a lot of good places to go. I could move to some farm, live extremely low-key and poor, and probably be left alone if I moved to the mountains, plain areas of somewhere like Chile. I've looked at Chile. Very beautiful, somewhat more moral people compared to some of the other areas in Latin America. A lot of European expatriates and American expatriates. Costa Rica's beautiful, but when the hell goes in a handbasket, it's going to melt down as well. You go to the outback of Australia, it's globalist run, but if you ran and tried to be left alone, you probably could be for at least a while. There's some areas of Northern Europe that are pretty good. Iceland is okay, but there's 400,000 people there and tenuous resources, but at least they've got their heads screwed on straight, and that's really what matters. If humans just work together for liberty, we're unstoppable. Switzerland, if you've got the money, which I really don't, not long term, you got to really bring stuff to the table to go to Switzerland. And the list just goes on and on from there. There's really nowhere to run, and my gut tells me that I'm not going to run. I need to stay here and try to fight and beat this. The problem is you look at the general public, who even though they're awake to the fact that we're going into tyranny, they still have no respect for themselves and almost have a hopelessness to just turn over the world to this evil. And if you look at textbook autocratic tyrannies, systems that the tyrannous spider weaves throughout history, this is the most thought-out, premeditated, scientifically prepared evil the world has ever seen that now has hijacked and runs America and is going into overdrive in the personage and the personality and the signet and logo and figurehead and shield and foil and shill that is the abomination Barack Hussein Obama. And now I realize that one of the few areas where I've not been visionary is Obama, because I began to think that I knew that all politicians were puppets run by the globalists, which they are. But then in Obama, we're seeing like a baseball pitcher who's the closer in the 8th and 9th inning. And I see every sign they're making the move to close. And I try to hope, and I try to pray, and I try to look at how we're winning on many fronts, but that's why they're closing. But then that's why I realize I've got to stay and put my fat in the fire no matter what happens and double down. But I don't blame anybody who wants to get out of here. Because here's the deal. It is foreign mega banks that are running things who use socialism to control the general population but are really fascist, crony capitalist, anti-free market monopoly men. But their ground level and mid-level enforcers are degenerate, Luciferian, satanic, Jacobin, French Revolution types. And they've got a score to settle with people like me. And they don't want even money. They don't even want the sex slaves. They don't even want to be above the law. They want to torture good men, women, and children. They want us in dungeons. They want to suck our life force out. They want to dominate goodness. And I'm telling you, looking at these spiders licking their lips, wanting to literally suck me dry, it doesn't cause fear, but I don't want to give them what they want at the same time. And then my instinct tells me, listen, you've done enough. Get out of there. You can talk to people from a distance, but then I've built this organization and this operation. When they start arresting members of the media, folks that are I mean, I'll just say it here. And I've got this from two different high-level sources. D'Souza has this America film coming out about trying to deprogram the minorities that have been put on the Ku Klux Klan Kool-Aid, the Democratic Party. And they do not want people knowing the Democratic Party was the Ku Klux Klan and decided to go race politics the other way in 1963 when they knew they couldn't win anymore. LBJ made that decision. And I know D'Souza's been looking at that, and that reportedly some of the things that are in his film. And they're not going to let that narrative be told. And then they're not going to let D'Souza make a film about Hillary. And so they're going to try to put him in jail. And when you see the mainstream corporate whore media line up and call for him to be imprisoned, not having any instinct for their profession or honor. I mean, you can say what you want about the cops, and they're corrupt in many areas, but at least they look out for each other. At least they understand that the whole system's not looking out for them, that they're the bottom of the barrel of the government where the rubber meets the road, that are given all the dirty jobs, and at least police know to stick up for each other. Where is the press sticking up for each other, you morons? If they can destroy Dinesh D'Souza, they can destroy anybody, you morons. And then you won't even be needed as a minion of the system anymore. Once they get rid of the real press, they're going to get rid of the faux press, dummies. You have no basic instinct. You have no common sense. You have nothing, morons. And we're going to lose due process and lose the weights and balances, just weights and balances, and then everything is going to go into a tyrannical black hole, you fools. I've told you this before. Picture our republic as a gate against incredible evil. Look at the rest of the world. You ought to travel. It's hellish. Look at Western society. It's falling. It was literally godlike compared to other societies. That's why everyone wanted to go to Western Europe and wanted to go to America. And now all of it's falling, ladies and gentlemen. The gates are physically, financially, spiritually, culturally falling. They're doing satanic ceremonies in every national television event. Just like they did in Rome, just like they did in Babylon, just like they did everywhere else before, all hell breaks loose. And now, image the walls like a force field shield that are becoming very thin. And the enemy's able to jump through the gate now more and more. The enemy is now amongst us, but that's only the vanguard of the enemy. When those gates fully fall, it's going to be French Revolution, folks. We all need to recognize what it is and say no to it. And we need to do like Ted Cruz has said, Obama is frightening and dangerous. And now Matt Drudge has come out, and I've retweeted it at Real Alex Jones. Please retweet it from there, folks. He says, have an exit plan. And he's just got away with words, saying it's so simple to get people thinking. Because I would say you got to have an exit plan because it looks like they're going to implode the economy and go after their political enemies, and historically this shows that it's a problem. I would talk for 2 hours trying to explain why you have to have an exit plan. He would just say, have an exit plan. And everybody then has a debate and goes, oh, yeah, I know why we need an exit plan. As Mark Slavo reports in his article on it, Matt Drudge issues warning, have an exit plan.